Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I went over the patch notes with Stream last night, and it took quite a while. Plenty of alcohol was consumed on my behalf to try and make this a bit more fun and get through it. And I want to just sum it up, sort of overarching little themes here or there throughout these patch notes for the YouTube real quick. Overall, I will say that yes, it is mostly doom and gloom, and it doesn't look great for actual changes. For the most part, a lot of the attack skills got brought up, but that's only because a lot of the support nerfs are pretty close to getting cut in half. A lot of them getting cut in half, a lot of them just having some mana issues and all that, which might make just building around things a bit more difficult. So for me, look, personally, it's not currently visually that much of an issue because Path of Exile is a problem-solving game. Here's a problem, try and solve it, try and make a good build, a good character, a good skill shine, all of that, and get through the end game content. So that's kind of how I like to play. But yes, it obviously doesn't feel good to just get a bunch of nerfs and all that. And I'm going to be the voice of optimism here and hope that this is just something, foreshadowing better things in the future. Because imagine a lot of previous changes that we've had and additions, just that you absolutely thought, a lot of extra power felt really good, that sort of thing. So things like ascendancies, cluster jewels, influenced items, all kinds of shit like that. It gets added, it's super powerful, it feels good to be that much more powerful. And we're at a point where you can't just keep slapping those on every single league because we're, on the high end already way too powerful, and none of the content is challenging to those high end builds, which can be pretty accessible. Plenty of these things are just that strong. So, some steps had to be taken back at some point. This is kind of the version of ripping off the band-aid of some power and getting some of that nerf in there. And I'd say hopefully that means that, in another patch, in another expansion, league, whatever, they can still release things as cool and as powerful as ascendancies and clusters and all that. Maybe that's optimism, maybe that's copium, I don't know. But, if you're just not having fun with the game in its current state with these changes, I'd say, yeah, don't really force yourself or anything, but look forward to potential future PoE stuff, because I think there will be, more buffs in the future, more fun new content. That said, I do think that slowing down the game it's a good move. At the moment, it's a bit too silly, and your choices matter less. And yeah, hey, we'll see. Some of these changes are pretty bad, though. They don't feel particularly good. So we'll go over them and see how we can adapt to all of this. So let's just do that. Let's get rid of this little text, and I'll just go over it pretty quick. I'm not going to go over every single change, obviously, because that is pretty ridiculous. What even is this? Full patch notes, here we go. So if you want to see the full 7-hour, 8-hour VOD, it's on Twitch, obviously, but Expedition League looks like it could be a bit of fun, could be a bunch of reward, could actually just have a lot of fun with the Geed gamble thing, or some of the merchant style crafting and all that. So something to look out for there. I think it should be good for leveling at the very least. They introduced 19 new skill gems. Now that is a big thing. So going over the nerfs, you're like, oh no, nerf here, nerf there, nerf there. We're not getting any buffs or anything good. Some of these new skill gems might be just the huge extra buff that we need throughout a league to bring our power level back up. Hard to tell at the moment, but it's a lot of extra content as well. Previous league, we had like 2 or 3 new gems, Reap, Sanguinate, that sort of stuff, and a few side things, and that kept me well busy. Like, I had a lot of ideas for those things, and even just 2 good skills can be very game changing. But here we might have a lot of game changes in the form of 19 new ones, so that's quite a lot of extra content there. So that's the exciting stuff. Few new cards, few new uniques, few new equipment base types in Expeditions. Some minor stuff, so they changed Lightning Arrow, Lightning Strike effects, which I thought were already pretty cool, especially the new lightning arrow, so I look forward to seeing what that's going to be. Other than that, pretty much nothing. Act 1 across the whole got harder, so they added a few things that used to exist, like tar zombies used to exist in a separate zone that was removed a long time ago in Act 1. They are pretty punishing for some builds. They're already very slow and melee and all that, so look out for those. You don't want to walk over their tar and just get extra slowed and destroyed. But in general, they're trying to get about 40 to 50% more life on just about everything in Act 1, so that there's more meaningful fights and more danger because of that. Hillock and the other dude, Uzbek, get their life reduced, so it's still kind of in line with that. So they're trying to bring back a bit more challenge and threat to the initial start of Path of Exile, and I think that should be fine. Flask charges and changes, so that's a big one. Big Flask revamp and stuff. They don't want you to sustain them anymore as much. Plenty, for the most part. I think some Flask is still going to be kind of okay. Diamond Flask is a big nerf, but in some builds it's still pretty good. It's maybe just not necessarily going to be the no-brainer that you use at all times in any diamond, in any crit build. Some builds already don't really need a Diamond Flask because they can get to such high levels of crit where it's not really worth running. That's not too common, but assassins and power charge stacking, shit like that, it can happen. Otherwise, some Flasks are going to be pretty much useless. For the most part, it's basically in the unique Flasks further down that the big changes are, I think. So some Flasks are getting pretty damn gutted, and you just won't really save a lot of time, effort, and energy into getting one of these Flasks into your build. Instead, they're supposed to be a bit more situationally pressed instead of just mainlining all of them during your boss fights, your gameplay. So we'll have to wait and see how that kind of unfolds. But look, anything that combats the current spam Flask system is probably good for the health of the game. Nothing too important there. Well, the poison thing, 50% more damage on your poisons baseline, so Pathfinder should still be pretty good. Assassin took some nerfs, but overall still should be kind of a poison ascendancy. Overall, it just means that your poison ramping early on is going to be a little better while leveling, and then also you can probably make a few more choices as to whether or not you're doing other ascendancies, and it's not strictly assassin if you're attacking a lot and need the poison. Conk Ground doesn't have the crit anymore, which is a bit of a nerf to Inquisitor as well as some other things, just taking away a bit of our crit. Nothing too important there. So like I said, most of the attacks, most of the skills out there have gained a bit of a buff because support gem nerfs are getting pretty brutally fisted, and there's not too much to really say there. Slight, like 20 to 25% more for just about every sort of added source of damage for most of these gems. And yeah, some things slightly bigger buffs, some things barely anything, some things maybe even a slight nerf. But for the most part, things that actually look good, I think. Lightning Arrow got a nice buff, I think. Traps might be more of a trap meta with some of these trap changes. Shield Charge looks like it'll actually hit pretty hard, potentially. I kind of wanted to build into Shield Charge already myself last league, didn't get around to it. Maybe I will this time, it's pretty damn strong. And likewise, Spectral Shield Throw is looking pretty damn tasty. Bleed Spectral Shield Throw right now, pretty good build. So this, with a big sort of damage buff and all that, I think should be pretty strong starter build. I don't know if I'll put one together for starter video, but it's definitely a build that should see some use this league, and it scales pretty well off of low gear. So Spectral Shield Throw, Bleed, not looking too shabby at all. Aside from that, like I said, a few little just small buffs here or there. And then we get to the support gems. Like I said, just about everything got a big nerf of about, taking off about 10% of its damage, if it's more damage, that sort of thing. So most things got roughly like a 20 to 40% nerf, as Chris said. But the big surprise is that there is additional mana costs on top of what they used to have, so that things are going to cost probably about twice as much mana as before on your skills. Now, that is a bit daunting to begin with, but currently mana in a lot of builds is very easily solvable. Like, generally take one leech node or some shit and forget about it. So it might mean that we just take a second leech node. Like, a lot of the time you're right next to the really good leech nodes, you take one of them just for the leech, but you can take a second point to get the really good big stuff for the extra regen and stuff. It might mean we have to reserve a bit less mana. It might mean mana flasks or some shit. Ultimately, I think it's just another little problem that needs solving, and we'll have to wait and see how it goes. But I don't think that's going to be the end of the world at this stage anyway. But yes, most things get a bit more mana cost associated with them, so that maybe mana becomes a bit more of a meaningful thing. The big thing that I think wasn't terrific is awakened gems have got pretty much nerfed across the board. Likewise with plenty of support gems, they got nerfed, but the more interesting aspects of these awakened gems got kind of removed. So a lot of the qualities are just basic bitch default damage or some shit, when they were previously, when actually introduced, marketed as these cool supports that have maybe some extra things as actual support gems or a bonus cool quality on top of it. And now it's kind of just, I don't know, it's so weird that they do this, that they just kind of step completely backpedal on this one. And awakened gems, for the most part, in a lot of skills, are essentially just level 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 of your regular support gem. So if it's going to be like that, maybe they should have just had an orb that you can use on your level 20 gem that could awaken it and let it level up to another 5 levels. Isn't that the same fucking thing? If it's this just bland as a awakened gem. So I'm not a big fan of that change, but you know, it's not life ruining or anything. And then yeah, plenty of things just got nerfed. Archmage massively gutted. Okay, fair enough. Let's see if there's anything else worth mentioning, strictly speaking. Not really. Cast when damage taken, man, that one got a big mana cost associated with it. So now it's 250 cost and reservation multiplier. And on top of that, you have to pay the mana cost when you trigger it. So that all but kills most things that associate with cast when damage taken. Like you might have very niche uses of it where you get one cast off every now and again because you specifically need it. But otherwise, it's going to be tough to shoehorn this into plenty of things. But that said, before you could afford to have like a cast when damage taken plus XYZ on just about every build. So maybe it was too homogenous. Who knows? Seems pretty steep though at the moment. Looks kind of dead as far as I can tell. Besides that, if we're talking, control destruction was a big one. So it now has 80% less crit chance associated with it if you attach it to a skill. Previously it was 100% reduced. Now the difference between that is 100% reduced is basically taking away the crit of the gem that you're using it with just by that much. So if your gem has 5 crit, you take 5% crit off the end result. So if you have 60 crit, you use this gem, you get down to 55 crit, right? So it's a slight nerf, but you know, to your crit, but it's something easily overcomable. Now with 80% less crit, that is just taking it off of the total amount by 80%. So you will have, instead of a 5 crit gem, essentially a 1 crit gem. And that becomes incredibly impossible to justify using this on a build that actually still wants to crit routinely, built into crit, and wants that extra bit of damage, which isn't even that good anymore. But yeah, it's basically not for crit builds anymore. It is basically for non-crit builds, and they need a secondary source of crit generation if they want elemental overload, for example. So you have like your Orb of Storms that drops for some extra crit, some elemental overload, but your main support, if you're going to use your main skill, if you're going to use control destruction, pretty much won't be critting or proccing anything for you. So that's kind of a big nerf there. Otherwise, if I'm going to mention anything else for this, yeah, there's a lot. Hex Touch, that one's kind of big. They got rid of the additional curse on the Awakened version. Not too many people playing with this. It's pretty rare, pretty expensive, pretty min-max. It was cool, it was powerful, bit of a no-brainer if you could get it, so it was just basically more power for the sake of more power if you could get it or afford it. So you can kind of understand why, but it does also make it just less of a chase thing to go for the min-max and a bit more boring. I think it was completely fine leaving it in place as it was. Maybe you could have just associated with a bit of a nerf on there for curse effect. So like, you know, curses have 20% reduced effect with this thing. So it's still a cool design choice to go for an additional curse and go for your third or fourth curse, but they get worse, they get weaker. So kind of a bit of a toss-up. Instead, it's now just kind of blah shit. Okay, so that. Hypothermia, the big one there everyone was upset about was that the more damage over time for cold was removed. So, you know, it was used for like Vortex and Cold Snap, that sort of thing. As soon as I read that and everyone was really outraged about it on Reddit and stuff, I had the feeling that they'd walk back on it and just say, oh shit, no, wait, that's kind of a mistake, or we get it. And that's back in the game. And sure enough, Chris did post a few hours ago saying that that is still going to be a thing. So don't worry about that. It will still work for your Vortex builds and all that. There was just no way they were going to leave that change in, I was pretty sure. Impale got a fairly big nerf. It might still be worth using, but maybe you'll have to get most of your Impale stacking elsewhere. Aside from that, I can't remember anything else too major. We'll scroll. Basically, yeah, a lot of freaking nerfs, and generally your build's probably going to have like half its damage from before, but plenty of good, well-made builds can still afford to lose that damage and then just have more meaningful combat, which isn't the worst thing in the world, just on paper. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe it feels terrible, maybe there's less build diversity. As far as other things, passive tree balance, I didn't really go over this too much because it'd be hard to kind of look into. Ascendancy balance, so we already pretty much saw all of these from the manifesto, but yeah, overarching theme is less ailment immunity. Some get completely taken away, some have about 50%, so you still have to kind of like build into it in other things. Item balance, let's see if there's anything I really need to mention here. Just a few little fine tunes, a few little tweaks here or there. Some things are going to be a bit harder to get, so you won't just randomly find level 2 empowers from some league mechanics. Instead, you do have to manually level those, and that's fair enough. Let me see if I can find anything else worth mentioning from memory. I don't think so. I really don't want to have to just cut edit me doing nothing and then saying the next thing, so I'm stalling and trying to find stuff to say and mention. Some Fortify effect was nerfed, as we already mentioned and already knew, so it's going to be a lot harder to get to a certain decent level of Fortify effect, but it's also capped, as well as that, similar to chance to avoid ailments, elemental ailments. That's a bit harder to get from various things that you could get it from before. This is some Flask rebalance stuff, so a lot of the Flasks just consume more charges, maybe last a bit longer, maybe last a bit less. It really depends on the Flask. And then if we take a look at the unique items, so some things got changed, some things got nerfed. Mjolnir basically still as good as it was before, just slightly different for lightning instead of spell damage, so a couple of little skills and builds will be affected by that, but it's not too game changing. If we are to look at some other shit that I thought was worth mentioning, it was they changed a lot of the unarmed stuff just so it won't work with the new skill, the Flask throwing skill, so the items themselves aren't actually really any different for those builds. It's just purely so that it won't work with the Flask throwing skill. Other than that, all of the unique Flasks, as we mentioned, not all, but a lot of them got pretty big nerfs. The one that really kind of made no sense to me, and I got stuck on during the patch note reading, was the Vinktar one. So I'm assuming that the Flask throwing skill is going to be pretty powerful and is going to want to use some unique Flasks and stuff, and that's why this nerf came into place. Otherwise, the nerf makes literally zero sense to me. So that's my assumption, that that Flask throwing skill is going to be powerful. Maybe that's optimism and that's copium as well. So they had to nerf some of these things because they were going to interact with it too strong. That's the assumption. Because if that's not the case, this change here, no sense to me whatsoever. Vinktar's was already really hard to use right now, very rarely used, not a very good Flask at the moment when compared to so many other Flasks. and now it is so much harder to use. 150 increased charges used. It got damage cut in half, and less penetration. It's basically just crap. So that's a pretty interesting change. Taste of Hate is actually worth mentioning, one of the better flasks out there right now. It did receive a small nerf, but it is still pretty damn good for what it does. Cinder Swallow got a bit of a nerf in that it won't give you all 3 of the recoveries on use during the use anymore, but a lot of the time you only really want it for like the life recovery, so it still should be pretty good there, but it's a lot harder to use because 250 to 300 increased charges used, so you'll essentially get to use it like once and, you know, pick a really powerful situation to use it in. It should still be pretty used, I think, and pretty good, but yeah, the overarching theme is that they're all going to be a bit harder to use and maintain. The Witchfire thing, I saw that Zizarane was really upset about it, but I went over it and I think it's still fine. Basically, it got its damage removed, damage over time. So it is a Blasphemy Despair Flask. That's always what it was. It's still going to be that, so that's still good to make sure you have some extra clear and convenient Despair around you on use of Flask. But I don't know, that seems fine. And then everything else got kind of nerfed as well. And Dodri's Elixir, just, it'll be interesting to see if you can get like the 3 power charges, 3 frenzy, 3 endurance, because otherwise it's destroying you on use. So it's going to be interesting to see how that can actually be utilized. But it is a pretty funny flask at this point, just the way it looks. A lot of the little clusters got slightly nerfed for the most part. Most movement speeds, some cast speeds and shit got removed, just so clusters aren't quite as powerful as they used to be. And I don't know, that's pretty much all I need to say, I think. There's, you know, a few little bug fixes, a few little other things going on, but I think that's long enough. And for the most part, as I mentioned at the start of the video, things are looking pretty nerfed, pretty slower. I think there'll still be plenty of fun to be had in the game. We'll have to wait and see. I just want to take more of an optimistic stance because, like I said, Path of Exile is more about problem solving. Here's another problem for me. Things are harder, things are different, and we'll adapt and overcome, hopefully. But at the end of the day, if we're going to play it, if I play it, if you play it, if it just feels slow, boring, hard, to enjoy because some of the fun mechanics and stuff got removed, or just harder to maintain mana or some shit. If you don't want to play it, don't play it, and don't be too upset. Hopefully there'll be good things in the future. I think Path of Exile, for the most part, still has a very strong foundation, and I think this is building more into its strong foundation for the future. So, yay. I think the nerfs are okay. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys are looking forward to the new league, and I'll see you next time.